The president traveled to Asia last week to attend the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit. Say that 3 times fast. We've got the details on the trip.
And U.S. Senate candidate Roy Moore every day is facing new allegations. We'll give you the latest.
Also, Donald Trump sucking up all the news. Just what else have we been missing, Chelsea? It's Tuesday, November 14th. Welcome to the Political Beat.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Hey guys, welcome to AfterBuzz TV's The Political Beat, the millennial show and podcast if you're listening, breaking down the latest in Washington politics and news from around the world and the country. We do, in an hour. I'm your host, Drexel Hurd, the semi-moderate, very moderate, it seems to some of our viewers, voice of the left. You can follow me on social media at Drexel Hurd.
And I'm Chelsea Galicia, the lefter of the left voices on the show. You can follow me at Chelsea Galicia, and you can follow the show at Political Beat TV.
Yes, you can, in the words of Barack Obama. First up on the show, I do miss that guy. I just got Pete Sousa's book, the Obama picture book.
Yeah. You spent 3
so
hours
good.
going through it.
I'm still going through it. It's so good. First up on the show, we're changing things up and talking about some of the important headlines that we think that just have not been getting enough coverage.
Yeah, and then every day is getting worse and worse for Roy Moore. There are new details, new people coming forward, new allegations, and we'll get into that.
Lots of women.
Lots of women, and
Binders
even
full
police
of women.
officers now coming forward. I mean,
oh yeah,
yeah,
that's going to be interesting. And then, but real quick, in a couple of weeks, December 5th, we will be doing a joint show. I know a lot of our crossover viewers from the Trump Report also watch this show, but we will be doing a joint show, a 2017 year-end review show with Christian Blatt, Scott Moore, Brooke Solis-Taylor, maybe Stephen Helmkamp.
Oh, yeah,
maybe
right,
we'll
if we
drag
can
Stephen
find
in here
that
if
guy.
we can. But be sure to tune in. That will be live Tuesday, December 5th. It will start live at 6 p.m. with the Political Beat, and then we'll go right into the Trump Report. I'll also continue to say it. Open enrollment is still open through December 15th, and signups are continuing to break records. It's nuts seeing some of the numbers that are skyrocketing for people who kind of want to live. Be sure to sign up to get covered, and make sure that folks that you know who aren't covered are signing up as well. Another shooting this time here in Northern California, leaving 5 dead and 2 wounded. What else can you say?
So
last week. We said it last week. We said it this week.
It's still heartbreaking. I think we can still take a moment, even though we're almost building up a callus to it because we just hear about it so often.
Yeah. I know that lots of information is coming in from folks here in
including
California.
the fact that this was at an elementary school.
Yeah, and then I just got an AP breaking mobile thing right before we came on that said that the shooter was trying to open more doors that he could murder more students. It's incomprehensible. Incomprehensible.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps because now in schools, some schools do active shooter drills,
right,
where they drill putting stuff in front of the door so the person. I mean, I wonder if that's.
They said because because of the lockdown, that's what saved a lot of those students. And so, wow. Crazy. But good news across the pond. Congrats to Australia for voting, although it's non-binding. So we'll hope the Prime Minister will, execute that non-binding resolution from 61% of the voters in Australia voting for marriage equality. So that is very exciting happening there. We didn't start it first, but it's good to see that other countries are following suit.
We're about the only one that we're, still in the cool kids club. And
right.
then we get over to Paris climate, and we're like, oh, no.
Yeah, we won't be in the cool kids club for another maybe a year and a half. We'll see what happens if things go the way that we want them to go. So Chelsea and I were talking the other day about how we miss so many important stories because Donald Trump is on the news every day. It kind of reminds me of 2016 when there were so many stories that could have been happening, so many policy conversations that was happening. Vox had an article that talked about the 2016 campaign and the Democratic primary and stuff like that, and how a lot of the news did the primary a disservice because all of the noise that was surrounding people, nobody could talk about the things that actually mattered. And I think that we got to get to a point where every time that the president does something, and even though it's very important, that we don't miss a lot of the news stories.
Maybe
that are coming
we
out of
should
Washington.
try and encourage people to, every time you tweet or comment about what Trump is doing, tweet or comment or do something about something else that's going on in politics too, so that other things don't get lost.
Right.
Because, there are big things going on behind the scenes, which would be front page news if it weren't for
Trump.
Cheeto in chief.
I mean, we could talk about Jeff Sessions' Judiciary Committee testimony today.
But we can't recall that.
Or lack of. I do not recall. It was long. I actually watched some of it today. We could talk about Don Jr., his confirmation that he communicated with Tim and I all day. We're doing the WikiLeaks. I do not recall the WikiLeaks. That's my favorite. It's like
You guys
Jeff
are
Sessions he's funny. The WikiLeaks during the campaign, and the vice president, his prior statements that no one on the campaign had contact with WikiLeaks, or we could break down the fact that the GOP is trying to tuck a repeal of the Affordable Care Act mandate into the tax bill that they will be voting on, or they will be attempting to vote on in the next week or so. But no, today we are going to discuss some other important things that, during all the crazy, the Trump administration would like us not to pay attention to. So, Chelsea, what the hell is going on?
All right, well, let's start with what's going on with the border wall. I think is probably
still a
Trump's
thing?
#1 goal. So on the border wall front, what's going on are a bunch of lawsuits. They've really kicked up the lawsuits into overdrive. So 2/3 of the land that this border sits on is either privately owned or state owned, not federally owned. And so the federal government has to take over by eminent domain or what have you to be able to build a wall. So besides the, what was it, $20 billion cost for the wall itself, it's going to cost the federal government a crap ton of money to buy the land itself. And we're starting to get an idea of how much it'll be. So now there are, going to be many more cases that the Justice Department is going to have to handle. 10 years ago, they tried to build a fence border, and that turned to be a very costly endeavor. And so this is only going to get worse, right? Some of the lawsuits just had to go on hold because they weren't going anywhere. But according to CNN earlier this year, $78 million was spent on sporadic fencing over 654 miles, which is a little over a quarter of the border. Do you know how long the border wall is? Or the border would need?
I do not.
2,000, almost 2,000 miles. And so, and besides that $78 million, there's another $25 million expected in unresolved litigation related to those 654 miles. So already that chunk has cost $100 million.
That's crazy.
And it's not even completely dealt with.
And for folks that don't know, they had been building prototypes here in California, down in San Diego, because that's where a good chunk of the border is. And I know Californian politicians have been trying to it's hard to fight. You can't really fight the federal government on that piece of it, so they just allowed them to build. I saw a picture where it was
six prototypes.
Yeah, six big prototypes along the. I mean, it's a little nuts. I know Washington Post had a.
It's a little putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah, it's a little crazy.
I mean, where are you gonna? You can't even put the wall anywhere.
But it's all like smoke and mirrors. It's all like, hey, here's what we're doing. We're trying to build these walls, and that's the way the Trump administration has been kind of.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to be really complicated. I mean, listen to this. So that CNN investigation found that there were another 211 miles that would be needed for the border. Involves 600 different tracts of property. And you've got to deal with each owner of each of those tracts. I don't know, perhaps some of those tracts are owned by the same people, but still, it has so far required 330 lawsuits.
That's crazy. And more counting, I'm sure.
And, right. And, the budget requests for this coming year are for more attorneys, 12 of them for the bargain price of $2 million. So there is movement on that front. It's a play on words on that front. I just realized that. But people should be, I am. I don't understand how Republicans are not going out of their minds that this kind of money is being spent.
They are. At least I feel like they are, because they know that it would never pass in a budget. You know what I mean? Like they're just letting the prototypes happen because we waste money on a lot of
But
stuff
they
anyway.
can't even get the land. And you know who just made getting land harder?
The Republicans.
And the card game, what is it?
Cards Against Humanity.
Yes. So I've never...
Because they aren't against humanity. They're actually
Right.
for humanity.
And in spirit of that, they bought a chunk of land that would be required for the border, and they have hired an attorney who specializes in eminent domain to fight whatever the government tries to do to take it. Perhaps they can't prevent it, but they can slow the process down. They can make it very expensive. And so I think this is their latest sort of marketing ploy, but hey, what a good one.
Yeah. I want to throw, Steve, if you can throw up that Washington Post article that we just threw back up there. The Washington Post had an article, speaking of legal things, the Trump administration has once again nominated somebody who's unqualified for their position. Washington Post reported that a judicial nominee who's never tried a case is also married to a Trump administration lawyer. Now, the second part of that is not as important as the first part of that, because the first part of that, the National Bar Association or whoever kind of evaluates judicial nominees has unanimously gone out of its way, not out of its way, but unanimously twice now, and has said that this person has never, he's never tried a case in court. He's like 3 years.
He's 36 years old,
Yeah.
a couple of years old, never tried a
Never
case.
tried a case. I mean, you at this point you should be a judicial nominee.
Well, thank you. I mean, but what's really scary about this is that these are lifetime appointments.
Right.
You've really got to do something really crazy to get removed. So in a way, it's a little scarier than Jeff Sessions or whoever else in this administration, because they'll go when Trump goes, but
Right.
this guy will be there. And
apparently this guy has a track record of making disparaging comments about people. So yeah, be watching that. So like, I mean, that goes back to the heart of like this show and just shows that talk about things that happen in the world, which is why it's important to actually vote, because then you get, if you vote the wrong people in, you get people like this who are allowed to have lifetime appointments, who have no business
really
being where they are. I mean, like Betsy DeVos and Ben Carson and a couple of these other buffoons
Really
who
amazing.
run things.
And then we get to talk about the November issue of Vanity Fair magazine, the one with J-Lo and A-Rod on the cover. Those are two people I never thought we'd be talking about on this show. But anyway, their love story is on the cover. But inside the magazine, there's an article featured that's by Michael Lewis. He's the same guy that wrote Moneyball and Big Short and others like that. And he wrote this article called Inside Trump's Cruel Campaign Against the USDA Scientists. And it is a must read. It is, I hate to call it fun reading. Maybe it's like fun, cringeworthy reading.
You're a masochist.
God, I guess so. I guess that's what that means. But really, there are several reasons to read this. Not the least of which is to have the faintest idea of the gazillions of things that the USDA does. There are so many things that we have no idea. For example, like killing birds that might end up in hitting airplanes. Killing those birds is the job of the USDA.
I did not know that.
There are so many small random things. I mean, they subsidize. That's actually what I'm going to get to next. But they're unbelievably diverse in their responsibilities. Agriculture, which, you know, United States Department of Agriculture, is really only a small part. And even within the USDA, those employees play a drinking game together called Does the USDA Do This? And they ask each other, do they this, and you have to drink if you get it wrong, and people get plenty drunk because they don't even know everything that the USDA does. So
What do they do, Chelsea? What do they do?
Well, that actually gets to the next part, because I didn't realize how much the USDA has a hand in helping so many people. I don't think people understand it. The article covers a guy who immigrated from another country, comes to work in the USDA and realizes that the apartment that he first moved into when he arrived in the United States was subsidized by the USDA and had no idea until years after working in the USDA. But they subsidize fire departments and housing and water systems and all sorts of things that you'd have no idea, aside from dealing with farmers and giving that's another thing. They give small loans to small businesses And most people don't have any idea that that money came from the USDA. And then at the same time, they're supposed to be processing our meat.
Yeah, so every time you go in there, you see USDA stamped on your steaks. That's where it comes from. I mean, I know Chelsea doesn't eat meat anymore. At least she says she doesn't. I assume that she does.
Oh, okay, that's fine. But yeah, this goes to the next point about how this administration gives absolutely zero fucks about what goes on in the USDA as long as the climate stuff is shut down.
Well, I mean, look who they tried to appoint Sam Clovis to be like the science guy from the USDA.
Not a scientist.
Who's not a scientist, he had to drop out.
Right. So while this, USDA is like a shell of its former self, businesses are starting to jump in like vultures on a dying carcass to try and privatize parts of the USDA. So this could mean that they privatize water systems and you and I pay higher prices for water. The part of the USDA that was giving loans to people has gone away. That was a rural development. That's gone away in favor of a foreign arm to the USDA, which used to be included with another one. But what's going to happen is that Trump voters are going to feel, not too far in the distant future, that they have been slapped in the face with a brick when they realize how much the USDA and the federal government together were helping them and how much they made an impact on their lives. School lunches and all sorts of stuff, food stamps.
Right.
They're going to be quite shocked. But I was just riveted by this article, and I highly recommend
Yeah,
that
so
you...
put it up against, everybody knows it's in Vanity Fair. If you're a Vanity Fair reader like I am as well, Inside Trump's Cruel Campaign Against the USDA's Scientists by Michael Lewis. So definitely check that out. What's the next?
And then, what? Oh, yes. Okay, Saudi Arabia, something that gets no airtime, right? So I call this segment of the show, How to Create More Terrorists Who Hate the United States. Laugh, but don't laugh at me because it is...
Hey, and I'm laughing at this picture of Ro Khanna because his head is chopped off. They intercept progressive Representative Ro Khanna, stop all weapons sales to Saudi Arabia now, which is not anything new, but Ro Khanna.
Well, the fact that there's actually a resolution that's been brought for 81 to stop it is sort of news that we haven't heard of. But I don't even think people have heard about what's going on at all. I mean, did you know that this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we bombed Somalia and Yemen?
Did not know that.
Yeah. In the name of, killing ISIS or Al-Qaeda. But the reality is that we've actually strengthened the Al-Qaeda from the Arabian Peninsula, which U.S. intelligence and counterterrorism officials have regarded as more dangerous, a more foreign threat to the United States than ISIS. So, of course, we don't just, these are unmanned drones that are not just killing the targets,
Right.
And we've also been helping Saudi Arabia bomb these people. Since 2015, they've been at it, or I don't remember, it may have been going on for longer. No, it started in 2015, and then 2 years ago, Barack Obama ordered military involvement, apparently using the authorization for the use of military that was given out and sort of issued by Congress after 9/11, but this doesn't really fall into that because it just doesn't sort of qualify, but somehow it skated through and we've been bombing ever since. And so we have been helping refuel planes, we've been providing weapons, of course, like $100 billion worth. Trump also signed a deal promising $110 in future weapons sales, intelligence, warships, all sorts of
Right, but this isn't something that we,
for
our relationship with Saudi Arabia isn't something that we don't know. I mean, this is not a Trump thing, this is not an Obama thing, this is not a Bush thing, this is back years and years and years, our relationship with Saudi Arabia and our insistence that we provide them with weapons that they need. Almost kind of like, and I'm sure some people will disagree with maybe this assessment, but it's almost our relationship with Israel. You know what I mean? In the sense that we provide these weapons And to some people,
Except is Israel like bombing Yemen or
to some people, Israel's using our weapons to destroy Palestinians, and in this case, Saudi Arabia will be using these weapons to possibly bomb not only people who they disagree with, but actual innocent citizens as well.
I mean,
So this idea that we provide weapons.
I mean, it's not new, but it doesn't mean it's right.
Right.
And so we have, you know, in Yemen, there is now a humanitarian crisis, the likes of which have not seen sort of in like modern history. I mean, we think the Syrian refugee crisis was bad. I mean, there are 500,000 people dying of cholera because water systems have been bombed. I mean, this is, I mean, as bad as it gets. And I don't know anybody else that's talking about this.
Yeah, I think, you know, on one hand, you know, we talk about I always find it's a fine line between national security, what is in the best interest of the United States and what's in the best interest of the world.
Helping people
right.
die.
But I think, but I also
helping.
right, and I understand that piece of it. But there are a lot of people in the country who would say that the safety of American citizens comes before the safety of other people.
But when you are helping people, like here's what's going on in Yemen, they don't know that it's Saudi Arabia bombing them.
Right.
Some of them, they think it's the United States, and they're only half wrong.
I mean, they only have right.
They're only half right and they're half wrong. But all it takes is for people to think that it's the United States, have people that they know and love be killed, and have a burning rage against the United States. Right. So I don't understand how this makes any sense from a terrorist prevention stance.
I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that the idea, this is why we don't talk about, this is why people don't necessarily look at it from a humanitarian aspect first, because we look at it, because a lot of people look at it from
if you can't give a crap about other people and you've got to worry about your own,
right.
Okay, fine, if you want to look at it from the terrorist perspective, but yeah.
I mean, it's a really hard way to look. I mean, it's a really shitty way to look at it.
It's like looking at everything through the economic lens.
Right.
What should we do about education? I don't know. How's it going to affect the economy?
Right.
I mean, it's just...
Yeah, when you start, people look at things so broadly, and all they care about is what's going to make them safe first, and then it's second. It's almost like it's almost like companies. What's going to make the shareholders money first, and then what's going to make the employees money
second? I don't actually think most Americans think that. I mean, I don't know. There's no polls that I know of, but I don't think most people believe that. I mean, I think that people who remember Bush's weapons of mass destruction.
It wasn't even about that, though. But if you saw the polling, if you remember the polling from that, Americans didn't care whether or not the information was true. It was whether or not America was safe from attack. So that's all that America cares about. If you look at polling on it, America only cares about what keeps America safe.
But do you think enough people don't realize that when we go and bomb these places and kill thousands of people, that those people don't get
I think if it was on the news every day, absolutely people would do that.
God.
But then again, we also live in a country where people get shot every 2 weeks and people don't necessarily care about it. So I don't know. And again, and that I think is, from a psychological standpoint, I'm not a psychologist, but that's
just
also
play one on TV.
But that also, if you really think about it, from a safety standpoint, the argument for gun owners is, if you take away my guns, I won't feel safe, right? So those are the same people that are voting, and for the most part, some Democrats who believe in gun safety or Second Amendment rights and holding their own gun as well, to say my safety comes before X, Y, and Z. And so, I mean, if you really look at, national security versus personal security, Americans will generally favor themselves over somebody else first,
except
and then
they need to think critically about it and think, they may be killing what they think is one terrorist, but then you give rise to, 25 others. I mean, when somebody dies, how many people go into mourning about that one person? More than one person, I'm going to probably guarantee you. And all those people in the back of their mind, and if they think that their loved one was killed by the United States, you don't think a couple of those people are going to come to hate the United States, maybe become radicalized? I mean,
but that's how
I don't understand why
those
people don't get that. But I also think that the reason that nothing is changing, of course, is because the influence of the military-industrial complex.
Oh, absolutely.
I think Americans are perhaps starting to wake up to it, but the military complex loves, giving weapons to both sides and
not only that, but
lots of money.
I always, I mean, you know, I'll always look at it from the other side of that, which is, and I am not disagreeing with you, which is Americans also care more about their jobs and what is going to bring jobs into their state.
Yeah.
And that's how United States senators think,
Yes.
and that's how congressmen people
and
think.
it's even true of California.
Right, and even California, even the Democrats here, even the Republicans here,
Yeah.
everybody's voting for that because, again, no matter where the money is going, Americans will always think of what is best for me first, and then other people second. And to the point where we talked about it a few weeks ago on healthcare. There is no reason why, if I look at somebody from in Alabama to say, hey, I want to help you out, why they aren't looking back at me saying, I want to help you out too.
Yeah.
And that is to me, a moral failure in the country where Republicans like to hijack this idea that they're morally superior when in actuality, they're the ones voting more to
Increase
military to not only hurt people abroad, but they're not keeping Americans safe here. I'm not saying that Democrats aren't in the same boat. What I'm saying is that Republicans try to make Americans think that they are, because of their religion, somehow morally superior to everybody else, and that is just not the case.
You know, I think most of us are morally bankrupt.
Yeah.
I don't mean, of course, nobody that's watching or listening to this show.
You know who's morally bankrupt though? Syria. But you know, but I say that because Syria was not morally bankrupt in this world, which is the Paris Climate Agreement, because they were the last holdout, other than the United States, on the Paris Climate Agreement, and the United States is sitting lonesome by itself in holding out on signing.
What about like
the Paris
Nicaragua, who like didn't sign on because
Nicaragua signed on before? I mean, it was like Syria and the United States.
Because Nicaragua was saying it didn't go far enough, but I guess they finally went along with it. So I thought perhaps we were the last of like.
Oh no, we are the
major
last.
country,
We
like
are the
absolute last.
absolute
Okay,
last.
great.
So it's so great. So yeah, definitely check out all those news pieces because there's a lot going on, and we definitely want to hear your opinion on those. So
And what I really want to hear about is what is going on that that's going on behind the scenes that's not getting enough airplay that maybe we overlooked.
Especially in the States, because there's a lot of things that are happening statewide. You know, one of the stories that kind of got last week that kind of got swept under the rug was, and Scott brought it up at the last second, which was Maine's expansion of Medicaid. But what also didn't get reported on as much last week was the fact that Paul LePage, the governor, said the next day that he was not going to execute that piece of it. So those are the things that are happening in states across the country that people are looking at it going, "Yay! The fight for progressivism is moving forward." When you've got Republican governors, and we said last week that there are 34 Republican governors out of 50, or 39 or something like that out of 50, that are not executing
on the will of the voters.
So speaking of the will of the voters, last week Democrats pulled off a feat no one thought would happen. It's been almost a decade since Democrats have had a successful win. It felt so good last week, y'all. I did a little dance before the show. It was great. I knew what was going on.
Do you know the latest on Garland?
I do. We mentioned last week that Garland Gilchrist, who was on our show a couple of weeks ago, had won the election last week. That was the latest as we were watching it live. And then there ended up being a last-minute surge in Detroit for city clerk, last-minute surge in the voters.
For the incumbent.
And the incumbent right now was declared the winner of that race. They've been going into recount mode. So that's where they are right now. So we are still holding out hope for that race.
That was the only reason that I wasn't doing a happy dance.
Yeah, but you know what? I say he ran a really successful campaign, whether or not he lost or not, and there is a good chance that he'll end up in the Michigan State Assembly or Michigan State Senate or in the House of Representatives.
If he doesn't get it, it's because it wasn't big enough for him.
Right. So in Alabama, a big state though, Roy Moore is the Republican. I know this is what everybody's been waiting on. He is running against Doug Jones. They're currently tied in the polls.
I thought I heard that Doug Jones was ahead by like 5.
See, I like to think that, but I like to,
Was I
downplay the idea that Doug Jones is
that far ahead.
For those that don't know, Roy Moore was the expelled Chief Justice. He's the one that put the 10 Commandments on the steps of the
How
Alabama
ironic, no.
judiciary.
I mean, thank goodness one of the amendments is thou shall not date teenagers
Right.
while you are a grown-ass man.
Right. Well, I'm sure Republicans would find a way to, figure that piece out.
So,
So the seat was left vacated by Jeff Sessions and currently held by Luther Strange, who ended up losing the primary against Roy Moore. So last week, 2 days after the election, Washington Post ran an article citing 30 sources that 30 sources, I say that again, that because people were like, that's not true. How do you have 30 sources and none of it's true? That Roy Moore had sexually inappropriate relationships with minors when he was in his 30s. I know that was a long time ago, but there's a lot of stories coming out with a lot of people, and we're holding them accountable, and there is no reason why we should not hold folks like Kevin Spacey and Bill Cosby and Louis C.K. and Harvey Weinstein and a couple other people accountable if we can't even hold our elected officials accountable. So 5 women have come forth to accuse Roy Moore, including Beverly Young Nelson, who held a really sad press conference last week about the time when Roy Moore attacked her as a teenager, telling her that she was just a child and that he was the district attorney, basically saying that who would believe you because I'm the district attorney. But Moore tried to pretend like he didn't know the first accuser, but then Beverly Nelson was the 5th accuser, and she had all the receipts, and we're going to throw up the yearbook photo because he wrote in her yearbook in 1977. It said, to a sweeter, more beautiful girl, I could not say Merry Christmas. Christmas, 1977. Love, Roy Moore, D.A.
D.A.
District Attorney?
Dear God. How obnoxious would I be if I wrote my name and I insisted it be ESQ or Attorney at Law after my name? That's just so obnoxious.
The only thing I would put DA after my name is Dumbledore's Army.
Okay, fine. That one I can accept.
So Roy Moore could not pretend like he did not know this Beverly Nelson because he wrote in her book. Some other things that came out, Moore was banned. This was the crazy thing. Moore was banned from an Alabama mall for basically like cruising young girls out of the parking lot outside of this mall. It was widely known. People are talking about it. So like people knew that that's the thing. People know that whether or not you're Republican or Democrat, a lot of people know that you should not be holding office, but they'll vote for you anyway. Because I was reading something the other day that said people vote party before they vote ideology.
Okay.
So means you will look at whether or not they have an R and or D behind their name versus and then their ideology second, because then you'll resign yourself to the fact that ideology. They can flip flop on a vote.
His other
every once in a
elected
while.
offices, judge, people don't pay that close attention to those.
But Alabama
so you're not going
voters
to check out the ideology of a judge before you vote on. I mean, I don't even do that.
Right.
On
But
all of them.
But people knew Roy Moore's ideology because of his stance on religious freedom, because of his stance
Religious
on
freedom.
Definitely put that in quotes. I actually tweeted out today because Jeff Sessions talked about how the Justice Department should be about religious freedom. You know, he should look into religious freedom and blah, 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 and the First Amendment and all that stuff. And I just remember saying somebody should ask, I don't understand when people bring that up and invoke religious freedom in testimony, why they never ask the follow-up question of, do you believe that religious freedom only applies to the Christian faith?
Oh, that's a good one.
Like that should, and then see what their answer is. Because then they have to justify that. And then, like, Congresswoman Jay Paul from Washington, it's almost like one of those things. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think she identifies as a Christian. I think she identifies as something else. But those people who are, even if it was Keith Ellison, like those are the questions that people should be asking them, because is it an attack on my faith? Is it an attack on your faith? Like where's the line on that? And I think somebody should ask that question to that.
It's very interesting how these constitutional amendments get sort of honed down into one key part. Like everybody's honed down that Second Amendment believes that you have the right to bear arms. Well, that's not what the Second Amendment says. It says well-regulated militia, and then later on the Supreme Court made it a, but that's what the the text of it says. And then the First Amendment has several different clauses. It has free speech. It has that this government cannot establish a state religion.
Right.
And then religious freedom. So it's not just that one thing.
But we all know that on the second that Republicans don't like regulation, so they will gloss over regulated in that Second Amendment clause. So let's just, resign ourselves to that fact. And and then on religion,
You just pick the half of the amendment that you like.
They try to justify it by saying that the country was founded on Christian principles, when that is debatable. That's debatable. So Roy Moore claimed that he would sue the Washington Post for the story that they ran, but I just don't think that he wants the discovery. Like I don't. I think that Democrats would have a field day with that. I think that Republicans who did not want Roy Moore in the first place would love to go after this guy. And so Donald Trump also, during the campaign last year, said that he would sue news organizations for their false stories. But again, a situation that I don't think that Donald Trump would have wanted people to litigate or while he was in transition, and certainly not while he is president. So,
and then many Republican senators have come out, including Mitch McConnell, to say that he should step aside, not even if they are true, but now coming out to say, I believe the women and he should step aside.
Right.
But as of yet, he hasn't done that. So
no,
really,
because he's trying to do the Trump playbook.
What's that?
Which is barrel on through, pretend like these allegations
that was his
aren't
Access
true.
Hollywood moment.
That was his Access Hollywood moment, and now he's barreling on through, saying he's using. If you listen to everything that Roy Moore has said, everything that's come out from the campaign, it is exactly the same rhetoric that Donald Trump used in the campaign. I mean, it's the same playbook.
Well,
the only other thing is that he doesn't have Steve Bannon.
And apparently the same line of thinking goes into people who still believe in Roy Moore.
Right.
Either, it's not that big of a deal because it's in the Bible that
yeah,
happened.
the state auditor had said something like, well, Mary and Jesus, what did he say? I might be able to pull
One
it
was
up.
an adult and one was a child.
Yeah,
and
it was
those were the
something
parents.
really crazy, and I'm trying to. Sorry, I'm just trying to see if I had it, because
But
I know.
besides that explanation, the other explanation for why they continue to support him is that if this is so true, why didn't this come out 30 years ago or in all the time that he's been in public office thus far? And it's sort of like, hello, it just now became safe enough for women to come out. And once one woman feels safe enough to tell her story, then that's when the rest do. I mean, Beverly Young Nelson herself said she would not have come forward had it not been for the women before her.
Right.
So that's why.
The other part of
it's
that
taken
is
30 years.
that it seems like Republicans love to have a little bit of amnesia, because it was only like 3 or 4 weeks ago that the Harvey Weinstein stuff came out.
Oh, yes.
And they were like,
Those Democrats.
he's a Hillary supporter, blah, 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 blah. This was something that had happened years ago, and now he is being accused of that, and they had no problem going after that. And it is very hypocritical of Republicans. Democrats seem to move very quickly on expelling, like on distancing themselves from people. Republicans like to embrace those people, and I get
and just
it.
be like, and what?
But that goes back to the thing that we always say: Republicans fall in line, Democrats fall in love, and if Democrats aren't that in love with people, they'll distance themselves from them.
So really, there's really 3 scenarios where this can play out. One is that Roy Moore loses to Doug Jones, and now we got another Democrat in the Senate. Okay.
Right.
The other is that he wins, and he either gets expelled from the Senate, or they just vote not to let him in because they can do that.
Right. So just I'm going to nerd out for a second. So just so people know, Senate expulsion, Article 2 gives the Senate, in the Constitution, gives the Senate the power to expel a member with 2/3 of the Senate, 2/3 of the vote, which is 67 votes in the Senate. Right now, 20 Republicans have come out against Roy Moore, and then you've got all the Democrats that could line up against him, and that would...
And then that puts the rest of the Republicans in a really bad situation.
I mean,
if any of them have re-election coming up, they've got to decide which way they're going to embrace this guy, or are they going to, vote him off the island?
Yeah.
And that's going to put them in a very, hard spot. Or, Roy Moore doesn't go through with this, and I don't know. Jeff Sessions gets Jeff Sessions they want him to be a write-in.
He would resign his post as
AG,
and then campaign for his Senate seat back. Governor Ivey, Kay Ivey, who's the governor of Alabama, is like waiting on Donald Trump to decide what he wants to do, because it's two things right now. Steve Bannon kind of controls that race for the Republicans down there. And Steve Bannon is kind of lukewarm on Roy Moore right now as well, and based on new allegations as they continue to come out. And Donald Trump doesn't want to he does not want to disappoint the base. So when Luther Strange ended up losing after Donald Trump had endorsed him, he distanced himself from Luther Strange, and then said, "Oh, I'm going to back Roy Moore," and then Breitbart came out with these articles and blah 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 blah, and then but Donald Trump knows his bread and butter is the Breitbart crowd and the Roy Moore enthusiasts down in Alabama. So Donald Trump is really kind of put himself in a rock and a hard place. The Senate, on the other hand, the last time a senator was expelled was 1862. Senator Jesse Bright, the Democrat from Indiana, which goes back to a conversation we had on Trump Report last year with a guy who tried to tell us, I don't know if you remember, he tried to tell us that Democrats were the same as they were back in the 1920s.
Oh my God, how could I forget?
Yeah, you remember that? It was like crazy. It was like, I think I threw. I couldn't tell if I was. I don't know if I was. I threw. No, I only threw Skittles at Stephen Helkamp. But
that was when we were childish.
Yes, Jesse Bright. We don't do that on this show. Jesse Bright was a Democrat from Indiana, along with two other senators from Missouri, Waldo Johnson and Trustin Polk, for supporting the Confederate Rebellion, which is crazy to me. Why, it's always sometimes you'd think, why don't Democrats, we had this messaging conversation, why don't Democrats bring some of this historical stuff up? Because it's like, if the Senate can expel a senator for supporting a Confederate rebellion, then why would they not speak out about Confederate statues? It seems to me.
Well, but now they're just saying it's history. It's not an active call for
I'm talking
war.
about the Confederate statues themselves.
Yeah,
You know what I
now
mean?
they look back at them as history, not as a support of what they stood for. Although, of course, they support what they stood for.
Absolutely.
But
so I think I am just not entirely sure what's going to happen in Alabama. It's a catch-22 for Republicans, though.
for sure. And I think, and every day more people are coming out. Like today, right? No. Da-ding-ding. What did you call this show? The episode name
No
was
More.
No More.
No
Yes,
More.
that was well done.
I think Trump Report that comes on right after this is No More, No More. I think,
okay.
yeah.
Very clever.
Yeah.
But today's people that came out were police officers that said, "Oh yeah, they knew about this. Everybody sort of knew."
Right,
So,
and but it also put the Alabama
definitely not
Congress people.
Democratic, police officers. This is not
no.
like a political.
It's really interesting how Democrats have kind of played this. Not a single Democrat has said a word.
I think that's smart.
Super smart. As soon as Nancy Pelosi says something, it becomes about Nancy Pelosi. As soon as Chuck Schumer says something, it becomes about Chuck Schumer. Democrats have not said a word. So if you think that Democrats aren't playing the smart game, or if you're like, where are the Democrats on this? It's because they're letting Republicans hang themselves out to dry. Because when it comes down to it, Republicans really don't have much of it. It's a catch-22 for them in the sense that they expel Roy Moore, they lose part of the base. They don't expel Roy Moore. It looks like they are endorsing this guy
Who's
who's
basically
basically a predator, not only a sexual predator, even though they've already allowed Donald Trump to become their nominee and then their leader of the party, but somebody who has no regard for American citizens that do not subscribe to his line of thinking, and that is something that we saw last week that that voters will respond to emphatically. It could have if the numbers that turned out in the Birmingham, Alabama mayoral race come out like they did, because there is a progressive that won the Alabama race, a young black guy who won the mayor's race in Alabama a few weeks ago. If they come out and they start those numbers start turning out,
Doug Jones
Republicans,
has got it.
not only does Doug Jones have it, but Republican Congress people are going to start looking.
I mean, can you imagine that? A blue senator?
Blue
from-
Alabama.
I mean,
Yeah, and that's what I remember in the election we were looking at Georgia, and we were like, Georgia could turn blue. Like Georgia's on the trajectory to turn blue, but could you imagine its neighboring state having a Democratic senator, and then
Unbelievable.
the bleed over from that? Like Mississippi is the Mississippi would never turn blue.
don't ever say never.
It would I would love that, but I just don't think that Mississippi would ever turn blue. But like those are the things that you guys have to start thinking. Like people have to start thinking about is put the pressure on those representatives to say, listen, this is not. Doug Jones just cut an ad today that went out today that had nothing but Republicans in it. I'm a Republican for Doug Jones. Blah 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 blah. That was the ad.
Wow.
Cut it out, put it out. But there are a lot of people out there that said, listen. I think somebody said I read somewhere that somebody said. I don't care if he was a child molester. He's just going to vote right. Somebody said that. A voter said that. And so that's one voter, and multiply that by.
I mean, I guess there could be some
few hundred.
people that are saying, well, it's not like he's going to push to bring a law to lower the age of consent to 14 or something. So it's not really going to matter to his positions.
Yeah, no, they don't really. I mean, like I always say, Republicans in this day and age seem to be morally bankrupt, and that is very true. The fact that so I was listening to something today that said Democrats are having the conversation right now about how we move forward to make people's lives better, and we're arguing about the best way to do that. Republicans are arguing about whether or not they want a sexual predator to be a United States senator. Like that alone should, if people don't understand the difference between Republicans and Democrats right now, then they are certainly really finding out the reality is that this is what Republicans believe, and this is what they fight about, where Democrats are over there being like, hey,
don't touch that health care.
don't touch the health care, but our health care is better. Which health care is better? It's like, the brother. Speaking of better, I said to myself, Donald Trump really did a better job at his foreign trip this time. At least I thought it was. It was like calm. There wasn't a lot of crazy that was happening. He went to Asia. It was his second or third foreign trip. He kicking off the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. He stopped in Hawaii, where I will be tomorrow. So if you're in Hawaii, say hello. Aloha.
My favorite part of his Hawaii trip is that he was greeted by people with signs that said, "Welcome to Kenya."
Oh, yeah. That was funny. I forgot about that. He went on to Japan, South Korea, China, Vietnam, and then he ended in the Philippines yesterday.
With his buddy Duterte.
The
people
Asian
left and
Summit,
right.
the Southeast Asian Nations Summit is a semi-annual meeting held by the members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in relation to economic and cultural development of Southeast Asian countries. So some of the highlights. So Trump, I say some of the highlights, like some of the highlights that we remember. Trump pouring a whole box of fish food into the koi fish. Koi fish. Those are the big red fish with the big lips and the big eyes. Next to President Xi.
This is a highlight. Let's move on to the next one.
But that's what people were reporting on. That was a highlight of the trip. Nothing. I don't even think
it's funny.
I don't even
looks
think
like he poured a whole box of cereal.
Looked like he did. I mean, he did pour the whole box in there. Oh, and then he not blaming China for unfair trade deals for the past. He just said that. Oh, I don't blame you for the unfair trade deals. It's subsequently blaming past presidents and secretaries of states for bad trade deals and thinking that he could do better. Trump tweeting from Vietnam that haters and fools somehow can't realize that a relationship with Russia is a good thing.
Where was he when he tweeted out the thing on Kim Jong-un?
In Vietnam. It was right after that, that Kim Jong-un was short and fat.
I mean, the memes that came out of that almost made my
Very
week.
funny.
I mean, my favorite one was the one that I sent you that said, Somebody commented, this tweet is so juvenile that Roy Moore wants to date it.
Oh, yeah, that was funny. I mean, it was sad, but it was very funny.
Yeah.
The other part was, the other highlight was that Philippine President Duarte and human rights violator serenading Trump at the palace.
Oh, I missed
Giving
that.
him the Barbra Streisand touch.
But there was one other thing that he said on this trip that was like the only thing that got coverage, and now I can't even remember.
Well, they asked about Roy Moore on the plane, and which I know Mitch McConnell talked to him when he got back today, because they just left the Philippines today and they got back today.
It's probably that, because I remember it had nothing to do with the trip itself, but it was some crazy comment.
Yeah, typically.
But there's so many, I can't keep them all straight anymore.
What's crazy about this trip, and what's crazy about foreign trips, or the trips that we've seen in the past, is that we've always come out of that with the United States saying we've accomplished X, Y, and Z.
Well, we're supposed to hear about that tomorrow, right?
No, we're supposed. He said, what did he tweet out today? That there would be a big announcement,
Tomorrow.
time and date to be determined. But I don't know.
Let's guess what it's going to be.
It could be about WikiLeaks.
He's like, you know what? I brought sushi from Japan.
It could be about Luther. It could be about Roy Moore. It could be about Jeff Sessions. It could be. I mean, Jeff Sessions. I mean,
I thought it was
today. I know we're not talking about Jeff Sessions, but today Jeff Sessions basically put cold water on this idea. Like 2 days ago, he said something about appointing a special prosecutor to look into Republican concerns on Uranium One deal and Hillary Clinton's emails. Just red meat for Republicans and for Donald Trump. But then today, during his testimony, he basically said, my Justice Department, there's not enough evidence for even pursue something like that because nothing happened. What were you going to say?
I don't remember.
Oh, I don't either. So obviously the White House agenda, the White House's agenda was supposed to be focused on North Korea and trade. Obviously Donald Trump saying, the Russia thing, that's what came up, was Vladimir Putin.
Oh, right.
Him
I
saying,
believe him. Yes,
I believe him, yes.
that one.
And so, we get it. You want to work with other nations to try to force North Korea into something that obviously they are having trouble doing. However, Russia might not be the best ally to do that because they are not an ally.
I thought it was so funny. Somebody else, I get all of my entertainment, I guess, from political memes, but it's like a list of people that Trump doesn't believe, including like 99% of climate scientists, doesn't believe this, doesn't believe the news, doesn't believe anybody, but Vladimir Putin says something, yes, I believe him. I mean,
that's funny. I wish before the show, our engineer Stephen was talking about a Vice video where Donald Trump, I guess, said I could do better or whatever. I wish we would have brought that up before the show so we could play it on the way out.
I think there was some announcement scheduled for tomorrow, or maybe it was just the press conference to give a summation of what happened in the last nearly 2 weeks.
I cannot imagine. I'm bringing up his tweet right now. Donald, I don't even follow him, so it doesn't even.
I know, can't bring myself to do that.
What's his name? He said, I will be making a major statement from the White House upon my return to D.C., time and date to be set.
And for some reason, I heard today that something was tomorrow.
I don't know. Who? So we will be looking out for that tomorrow while I'm on the plane to Hawaii.
That video is loaded and ready to roll.
Yeah, we're gonna play it on the way out here in a second. So lots going on in the world today. I don't know what to tell you guys because who knows what we're gonna get into next week. In a couple of weeks, we've got somebody from Vote Vets, which is going to be really good. Vote Vets has been a huge anti-Donald Trump force, a coalition of a lot of veterans against Donald Trump.
Oh, we had Veterans Day.
Happy Veterans Day to all those. Yeah, so I wish they would come.
Is that what you say is Happy Veterans Day?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's not Sad Veterans Day.
I mean, I don't know. It could have been Merry.
No, it's not Merry. It's Happy Veterans Day.
Okay.
As always, we love viewer feedback and listener feedback, so continue to leave your comments and thoughts on the show or anything that you heard today, especially a lot of the topics that we talked about today. Follow us on Twitter at PoliticalBeatTV. Mark your calendars for December 5th again for our joint show year in review, and send us your thoughts on some of the best moments of 2017.
Best can also be worse.
Best can also be worse. Don't forget to check out the Survivor After Show tomorrow night, the Gotham After Show on Thursdays, and get the latest on what should be on your DVR with the AfterBuzz DVR report. So be sure to follow AfterBuzz TV on Twitter there. So the best, as Donald Trump likes to see, we're gonna play what Vice says might be one of the best things of the year.
Nobody can do it like me. Honestly. Nobody's stronger than me.
Nobody has better toys than I do.
There's nobody bigger or better at the military than I am.
Nobody loves the Bible more than I do.
Nobody builds walls
That's
better
funny.
than me.
Nobody's better to people with disabilities than me.
Nobody's fighting for the veterans
There's a
like
list.
I'm fighting for the veterans.
There's nobody that's done so much for equality as I have.
There's nobody more pro-Israel than I am. There's nobody more conservative than me.
There is nobody that respects women more
That's
than I
funny.
do.
Nobody would be tougher
Wait,
on
we're only
ISIS.
halfway through.
Yeah, we're only
than
halfway
Donald
through. This is like
Trump.
a
Nobody
4-minute
ever had
video.
crowds like Trump has had.
There's nobody that understands
A minute and 37
the
seconds.
horror of nuclear better than me.
Nobody even
I
understands
will say
it
there's
but me.
nobody.
It's called devaluation. The sale of the uranium that nobody knows what it means.
Except-
I know what it means.
Nobody knows more about trade than me.
Nobody knows the game better than I do.
Nobody knows the game better than we do here at the Political Beat. Be sure to watch the Trump Report right after this. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye. I can't believe that.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Keven Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
See you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.